Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi on this Sunday. What a beautiful Sunday it has been. Here's a close-up satellite view of just how gorgeous it was across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Long Island, southeastern New York, through Connecticut, down into Maryland and Virginia. I mean, this is just spectacular for the end of July to have all this dry air and in that storm system off the East Coast really responsible for this because as the way the atmosphere works, if something potent is on one end, you're going to have sort of the opposite response on the other, and all the moisture and storminess that went offshore, the payback was a lot of dry air being drawn southward down from southeastern Canada. And here it is on the wide satellite view. This is pretty unusual. You have the frontal zone here. I'm going to stop the satellite for a second, but this cold front here with this low made it all the way down through the Gulf Coast. I mean, that's really amazing. So you had a ton of dry air that moved down from southeastern Canada, and that just took over for the whole day. And you have just a few cumulus clouds around the Great Lakes, and then a few cumulus clouds popping up across Alabama and Georgia. But other than that, I mean, this is just amazing. And look, all this dry air, we still have to work through it over the next couple of days. So it's going to be very nice here. Here's an enhanced satellite view, which is a little bit different, highlighting the highest and coldest cloud tops. And you can see just all how dry it is. Meanwhile, I just want to point out, and this happens sometimes as well, when you have these fronts that go by unusually far to the south, you get little frontal waves that develop, and one has in the northeast Gulf of Mexico. There's a low pressure center there, and sometimes if you wait long enough, if there's enough time, these things can oftentimes become tropical systems over a period of several days. Now, this is going to be moving to the northeast over the next several days as well, so it has a limited amount of time. Also, this is going to take a track offshore because of the fact that you've got all this dry air here in the eastern part of the United States. So this is not going to be any kind of threat other than whatever happens in Florida in northern Florida with respect to showers and thunderstorms that are going on. And you'll be able to see those on the radar, and I'll point that out right now. In fact, we'll jump ahead, and you can see showers and storms have even actually exited northern Florida. They've moved more along the lines of central Florida. That's just how far south this frontal system has moved. Now, I'm going to show you the west real quick because you have Tropical Storm Hillary, which continues to weaken as it moves over the colder waters of the Pacific. In the west, of course, it's another nice hot summer day there, and you've got some showers and thunderstorms in the Rockies over into the Central Plains, or at least the beginnings of some showers and storms there as we go through the late afternoon and evening. Otherwise, in the west, it's pretty quiet. So this is because of that ridge that's out in the western part of the United States. And here's the enhanced view. There's Tropical Storm Hillary as it continues to move northwestward and weakening. Should be gone before too long. You have a strong system way out in the northern Pacific here, and the Gulf of Alaska. It's kind of driving all this in the west, and you know we're going to probably see another cold front approach here maybe late this coming week or next weekend. But until then, we're going to be in pretty good shape. So let's just show you how it shapes up on the surface. You've got a rather strong, for this time of year anyway, high pressure sitting in eastern Iowa. You can see how dry it is on the surface map here. Here's your frontal zone that runs down off the east coast and off the Florida over Florida with that little wave. And the next couple of days for us is just going to be a gradual transition to a warmer and more humid air mass as we start to see the high shift to the south and winds go to the southwest. Thunderstorm development during the next couple of days looks to be non-existent. Maybe on Wednesday we may start to see some pop-up cells. You can see them here forming across south-central Pennsylvania, north-central Maryland, and on into southeastern PA touching New Jersey. I mean, that's the model's view, but who knows if they're actually going to be there or not. And then again, we'll see them more north and west on Thursday, because here's that next cold front that's going to be approaching for the end of next week. Now, this one's going to be a bit of a slow mover. It's not going to come in a big rush, and that's going to probably mean a prolonged period of humidity going through next weekend, and chances for showers and storms on Friday and again on Saturday. And then maybe by Sunday we get a little bit of an improvement with the front going by and moving out. And, you know, when I look at the overall pattern over the next 10 days or so, and I'll show you the upper air here. I'm going to give you a wide view because then you can get a flavor of how the whole jet stream is working here. Here we go. So let's back it up. You know, we've been seeing these series of troughs here in the eastern part of the U.S. that come and go. You know, they move down, and there's the next one. And, you know, you've got the jet stream going west to east across Canada. So here's your big ridge in the west. Here's your Atlantic Azores Bermuda high, which is more of an Azores high rather than a Bermuda high. The Bermuda part of it is lacking here at the moment. But as we go through this week, you see how this trough lifts out. The next system is going to be dropping down out of Canada and creating a new trough. But this one's going to be a little bit further to the west. This is going to be more in the Great Lakes region. You can see it here. This is by Saturday. You've got a trough here, but we've got a south-southwest flow here along the east coast, and actually the Bermuda part of the Bermuda high strengthens a little bit. The ridge in the west retreats to just off the west coast, so that kind of sets up the trough to our west. So what that would mean is that that next front is going to take its time moving eastward. It's going to have to wait for that trough to pivot and lift up to the northeast, which it eventually does. In a week, it starts to weaken as it lifts up to the northeast, so you get that front coming through, and it's relatively weak. And after that, I mean, it just looks rather warm and rather humid. Probably through the middle of the month, there's another system that's dropping down from the Great Lakes here, but the pattern overall is warm across much of the U.S. except for the Northwest, and also it's warm across Canada with an upper high building. So if this is the case, then the cool part of the jet stream, which is right over here, is not going to make it down into the United States. So this will favor, let's call it the August dog days, because that's really what they are, those long periods that can last 4, 5, 6, 7 days or more, where it's just very warm and humid, not necessarily extremely hot, but very warm and humid and uncomfortable. There's your Bermuda Azores high. Your western ridge kind of moves up into the Rockies, but again, with no real trough here, just sort of a weak system going by. You don't have any shots of cool air. At least that's what the long range is indicating at the moment. Now, I want to look real fast. We'll look at the tropics, and we do have a tropical wave out here in the Atlantic. And here's our frontal system with a low that's in the northeastern Gulf of Mexico. The Hurricane Center rates both of them, rates this a 30% chance of developing in the next 5 days, and it rates this one also as a 30% chance of developing in the next 5 days. And here's the visible loop, by the way, of Hillary, and this is Tropical Storm Irwin to the south, which is a little stronger. Top winds of Irwin 55 miles an hour, and you can see the effect, by the way. Let me move myself out of the way. You can see the effect of Hillary literally pulling Irwin northward. The trough that Hillary creates in its wake is pulling this Irwin to the north, and part of Hillary's circulation is actually captured. This is almost like one big circulation here with two distinct tropical storms working around each other. And when they do get this close, we have what's known as the Fujiwara effect, where one tries to rotate around the other. In this particular case, Hillary is just basically hooked a line to Irwin and is just pulling it along for the ride. So Irwin is going to eventually meet the same fate that Hillary is meeting as it moves over the colder waters. By the way, we'll look at the water vapor imagery loop because this is important as far as tropical storm development is concerned. And notice the upper lows. We've had this large upper air storm in the central Atlantic for well over the last 2 weeks, and that's created strong wind shear conditions. That low looks like it's starting to pull up to the north, so we're going to have to watch that because once that gets out of the way, it could make conditions more favorable across the tropical Atlantic. The one thing that's working against that right now is the fact that you still have all this dry air right there and up here. You see where you have the brownish and almost whitish shadings there. That's dry air, and that's actually air that comes off the Sahara, including the dust from the Sahara that moves in. And when that's present, tropical storm development is a very, very difficult thing to accomplish because all that dry air gets entrained in any kind of developing circulation, just basically kills off anything that's out there. And you'll notice that the convection that we see out here, the thunderstorm activity, is relatively weak. In the Gulf of Mexico system, you see that there is thunderstorm activity there, but it's kind of elongated, northeast, southwest, like you would normally see with a cold front. And there's no sign of a low-level circulation developing here that would be characteristic of a tropical system. Normally what would happen is that the system would warm and go from cold core to warm core, and gradually the tropical part of the system will separate itself from the frontal part of it. The front will just pretty much disappear and fall apart, and then you have have a low that develops inside a warm environment, or perhaps we'll call it a more of a tropical environment, and then you get a tropical storm to develop out of it. But right now, all we see is disorganized thunderstorms with probably low pressure that's sitting out here, and no sign that anything is developing in a big hurry. So that would make total sense. So let's leave you with this gorgeous visible satellite view showing the clear skies for our entire area. I hope you enjoyed your Sunday and the great weather we had today across the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states. And we will see what the weather maps tell us down the road over the next couple of days. I appreciate you being here for these live streams. And you can see more, by the way, on these live streams. And hi, everybody. Just hang on one second. I'm still here. For these live streams. And hi, everybody. Just all right. So, can you guys hear me? I'm going to assume that you guys can hear me, and you're not hearing double audio, correct? So, just let me know that that's the case. And I'm going to assume. And yeah, it does sound like we're all good here. Okay, let me just say right off the bat, first of all, because I forget to do this, and I really should not. I really should do this every time. The maps that you see, the upper air, the surface maps, those are courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com. It's a great website and a great weather source for maps, all different levels of the atmosphere. All the models are on there. So I want to give a big shout out and a big thank you to Levi Cowan, who runs that site. And you weather geeks on my channel need to go to his channel and subscribe there too. That's Tropical Tidbits. Levi is very, very good at what he does, and particularly when tropical storms are running around, he gives great analysis and a great technical analysis. If that is what you enjoy and you're interested in, by all means, go to his channel too after you've come to mine, or go to his channel first and then come to mine. But his maps are great, and I want to give him a lot of credit, and I'm very thankful that he is kind enough to let me use them and show them to you. So with that, we did touch on the tropics, and you noticed on that water vapor loop that big upper low we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks is finally pulling away. So that might create conditions more favorable for development across the tropical and subtropical Atlantic. But there are a lot of other things that have to be corrected, including the fact that we have all that Saharan dust that's been a problem, and that dry air is still there. We'll monitor it to see what that does. Weather models today, really, we're not very bullish at all with regards to any kind of development of either system, the one in the Atlantic or the one in the northeastern Gulf of Mexico. And the one in the northeastern Gulf of Mexico is a frontal wave, and that's all it is at the moment. But if you look back through the history of tropical storm development, there are a number of storms that have developed and then gotten their starts as frontal waves. And what happens is that they basically, the environment is warm enough that they eventually separate themselves from the cold core frontal wave and become distinct entities, and the front itself just pretty much falls apart, and the waves intensify and become tropical systems. That can happen sometimes when we've seen it happen, usually during the months of August into October, when the ocean water temperatures are certainly supportive for something like that to happen. If something like that happens in this particular case, the low will be tracking out to the northeast and off the Atlantic coastline and goodbye. So it's not like it's any threat to any land area along the East Coast. And with what's over Florida, with some showers and thunderstorms, you're not going to see this thing develop very fast. So even if you were to warm core itself up into a tropical depression, when it comes out on the other side, on the Atlantic side, it's not really going to have an impact that's any different from what you would normally have in terms of showers and thunderstorms, which we saw going on down across central Florida. Northern Florida is out of it. I'm just amazed at how far south that front got. And we had temperatures, by the way, in many areas of the Northeast drop down into the 40s and even some 30s in some of the cold spots in the valleys in Connecticut and on up through upstate New York. So it was a nice benefit from that ocean system that developed yesterday. So Dio, hi to you. Raymond, Paul wants to know if there's any sign of that dust diminishing. At the moment, no. But let's give it the next 3 or 4 days, and let's see with what's out there how that evolves. Okay. I would tend to think that if that upper low pulls out and you start to shift the the intertropical convergence zone, that's the area where we see these waves coming out and moving across. If that shifts a little further north, maybe the dry air will get cut off. And a big hi to ABC Ruiz. Nice to see you here, pal. And okay, back to the QBO and the M. I have not looked at the Madden-Julian oscillation. That's the MJO, and that's, in simplest terms, that's just watching the tropics on the other side of the world and seeing how, where the thunderstorms cluster and develop. And there's been a connection made between tropical activity in certain parts of the over in the Indian Ocean and in those places, and how, that impacts the weather down the chain, across the Gulf of Alaska, over into North America, and so on. But I have not really given it a good look. I'm not big on looking at a lot of those long-range oscillators because, they require a lot of time and a lot of head work, and I'm so focused on the short range that especially this time of year, I don't pay too much attention to that. Greenville weather, nice high pressure over South Carolina. Yeah, you got a nice break out of all of this. It's great to see, this nice little shot of air make its way all the way down to the south. Just some general observations. We're going into the month of August. Tropical activity usually begins to increase as we go through the month. So I don't see why. That should be any different. The summer is behaving normally in a lot of ways, and I would probably expect the tropics to do the same, based on what we're seeing out there. No La Nina, no El Nino, just kind of a normalized atmosphere all the way around. So I think we're going to be seeing development happen over the coming weeks. But it might not. You're going to probably, if you're a tropical storm or hurricane buff, you're going to have to be patient given the conditions that are out there at the moment. Let's see, Devlin, 4519. Do you think there is still a chance for 90s in Boston? Yeah, I have to look. I mean, have you had many 90-degree days? I'm thinking you probably haven't. We're going to get very warm and humid for for some stretches, but it's not the type of upper air pattern that would suggest it getting, really extremely hot. So, you may push middle and upper 80s twice. Wow, that's pretty low. I don't know what your average is for a given summer, but only twice is pretty low, considering number of summers in years past when you had many days. But we're getting with the pattern we're in, it would favor temperatures up middle to upper 80s, maybe near 90, but nothing extreme. We're going to see it day to day. I would tend to think that this week, I mean, if it's going to happen, it would probably be either Wednesday or Thursday. But if you've been fighting it up until now, maybe you won't get any. Yeti Man, are we done with heat waves? I don't see anything extreme in the Northeast or Mid-Atlantic. I see typical August, very warm and humid conditions, near 90 or low 90s. But in terms of mid to upper 90s or anything like that for 3 to 5 day stretches, I'm not seeing that. Devlin, 3 times mid-May, 3 days in early June. Also, we had 4 days in July, and that's been it so far. And I've continually advocated the fact that I really wish they would go back to the 5-day definition of a heat wave as opposed to the 3-day, because the 3 days is just too short. And you could get, any random 3 days in a row to be classified as a heat wave. I just wish they go back to 5 days the way it used to be. 5 days of 90 plus or 3 days of 95 plus. If it was my world, that's how I would define it for the Northeast and Northern Mid-Atlantic states. Are we done with severe thunderstorms in the Northeast? Raymond, I would tend to think that we're going to probably transition over to thunderstorms that, rather than the ones that produce, straight line wind, they're going to be more rain focused than anything else. We've seen that already in the last week or two, where we're getting these thunderstorms that are producing flash flood conditions, as opposed to straight line wind damage or tornadoes for that matter. So I'm going to guess that we're going to go in the direction of more heavy rain rather than damaging winds and tornado activity. That's, again, my opinion. I could very well be wrong, but from what I see, you start to get into August, and you do get thunderstorms, but they begin to get a little long in the tooth, in a manner of speaking. It's the atmosphere is not going from cold to warm; it's going from very warm to less warm to cooler. Your temperature contrasts are not quite what they are in the late spring and early summer in the Northeast. Severe weather in the Northeast is usually a June-July phenomena, and in the Midwest and Plains, it's more of a March to June, early June phenomena. So I'm thinking going forward, rain might be the bigger outcome from heavy thunderstorms rather than wind and tornadoes. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to touch on. I think I pretty well covered it. Devlin, what times of day do I have a better chance of catching my live stream? 11, 3, and 5. Oh, good. Then let me address that. Right now, because of my schedule, being that I work from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., and then I'm also on the road driving for an hour of either side of that, during the week, my live streams are going to probably be in the mornings up until about noon. I'm not ready yet to I would love to be able to do them at a specific time. This way there's some sense of regularity, but I can't really do that at the moment because of all the other things I got to get done in the process that we call life. But one day I will be able to just set a fixed time, and I certainly will let you know. On the weekends, I'm a little bit, I have a little bit more latitude to do these live streams, so I will tend to do those later in the day, maybe closer to 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening, rather than doing them early. But if weather conditions call for me to do a live stream earlier in the day, I will do that. And by the way, you'll notice what I will do is I'll start this by putting up that Joe Stradamus logo of mine with the music, and I'm going to run that for about 1 to 2 minutes. So when you see that come on, that'll be your sign that the live stream will start in less than 2 minutes. This way, gives everybody time to kind of get on board so that they can catch it from the very beginning and not have to go back and watch it later. Although if you do want to watch it later, you certainly can. Again, eventually one day I will get to a fixed time. Luis, Nassau County has not experienced severe weather the past 3 summers. Luis, I got to tell you, Long Island has been in a severe weather drought for probably the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, except for that huge event in, I believe it was beginning of August of 2013, when we had a foot of rain, and Islip MacArthur Airport set the state record for 24-hour rainfall, getting 13 inches of rain. And by the way, that 13 inches was not in 24 hours. It was basically in 4 hours. We had amazing flooding out here because of that. It was a rain that I have never seen it rain like that. It was as if somebody was pouring buckets of water, and you pour a bucket of water, you see how the stream is when it comes out of the bucket. That's how it was coming out of the clouds. I never heard it or saw it rain as hard as I did in that particular deluge that we had. But other than that, and then the stray events for thunderstorms from time to time, there's been a thunderstorm drought on Long Island, particularly in Suffolk County. No less so in Nassau, but particularly in Suffolk County. Devlin, Boston has not had much, but storms severe ramp up a little this year due to trough in Boston. In the past, thunderstorms fizzle out in Worcester, Mass. Well, you probably have the same issue, Devlin, in Boston that you do on Long Island to some degree and in southeastern New England, and that's that the ocean wind and the sea breeze, especially in the spring with the less than 50-degree ocean, there's going to be a thunderstorm killer at least into the end of June, early July. And we have now water temperatures are up at 70 or better, so the marine influence is so much less. Albany has the same issue, Raymond. Okay, sure. You get that sea breeze that comes in off the Hudson River up your way, I guess. But yeah, I'm amazed. I think maybe I've seen 1 or 2 thunderstorms here at most in the last couple of years. And it wasn't like that I can remember back in the 90s and early 2000s. I mean, we'd get our fair share of thunderstorms. We did actually see, by the way, here on Friday, something I hadn't seen in a long time, but we had downpours develop on a sea breeze front that developed across Long Island, and it literally paralleled 2 east-west highways. One that the Long Island Expressway and Sunrise Highway. Sunrise Highway is along the south shore of Long Island. Long Island Expressway cuts across the middle, and they go both west to east. And a sea breeze front set up in between those 2 roads, and from Nassau County all the way out to Riverhead, and they only lasted about an hour or so. You had some heavy downpours that developed. They were maybe at most 2 miles, 3 miles wide, and places got poured on for a short period of time, and then as quickly as they showed up, they disappeared. Basically, what that is from the north shore of Long Island, you have Long Island Sound that borders the north shore of Long Island, and of course the Atlantic Ocean on the south. Well, you had northeast winds on the northern half of the island, and you had south winds on the southern half of the island. And where that zone met, that convergence, you had a tremendous amount of lift, a little bit of strong vertical motion, a lot of strong vertical motion in the atmosphere, lifting, and as a result, you got a very narrow band of heavy downpours that developed, and as fast as they developed, they just kind of sat there, and as fast as they developed, about an hour later, the atmosphere just kind of equalized, and they disappeared. Raymond says, I haven't seen any severe thunderstorms directly hit Albany in a while. It hits from I-90 north, and they stay west, or they go strong to the Berkshires. Yeah, you know what? Those things kind of run in cycles sometimes. I mean, sometimes you're sitting in a bowling alley and you're the 10 pin, and other times you're the side pins. And you don't always, some years you kind of figure out early on when you see weather patterns develop. I tell young forecasters this: try and recognize a pattern as it evolves, because if you do, and I use the old line of the trend being your friend. If you recognize what the pattern is early enough, you will be able to make some forecast calls that are good ones over the coming weeks and months ahead until the pattern changes. We saw, the pattern for the summer so far, at least down here in southeastern New York and in New Jersey, have been these, 3-day 90-degree plus temperatures hit, and then after that, we go back to this trough in the west, trough in the east, ridge in the west pattern. And then that lasts for 4 weeks, and you get another hiccup. We got one in mid-June, and then it went back, and then we got one in mid-July, and then it went back. So, if you recognize that early enough, you can make some pretty good forecast calls. Minnesota, Devlin, that was always in the big storm zone. Well, because, they're on the edge of the jet there with those troughs coming down from the north. And the big ridge in the west, they're right in that border zone, and that's usually where you have strong thunderstorms develop. And they've had quite a bit of severe weather in the upper Midwest this spring and summer, more than their fair share, I would say. So it's been very, very active there. Going to be interesting to see as we get deeper into the month of August, in my view, where this all goes in terms of the upper air pattern. You're starting to see this sign of, the typical Bermuda high, the August dog days settling in, the jet stream pulling up along the Canadian border. Up until now, those those troughs have been coming down every 4 days or so. Maybe we're going to be getting a break from that. So we need to watch the pattern evolve in the next 2 weeks and see if that carries over. The past number of years, we've been going into this kind of warm, humid pattern later in the summer and lasting through September. And we haven't really seen early onsets of fall weather here. Fall seems to have gotten itself delayed by about 4 to 6 weeks over the last number of years. So it'll be interesting to see if that trough in the east disappears, whether that also means that this will be another summer into autumn period where temperatures are going to be running above average in the east until the atmosphere does what it does and changes itself. What is vertical velocity in our atmosphere? Vertical volatility. I'm not sure what you mean by that. During the winter, typically you don't get as much lift, so you certainly don't see air mass thunderstorms, except down in Florida. And you do see thunderstorms, but they're more, they form as a result of cyclone development, warm front, cold front, and the whole process of intense cyclones developing. And then in the warm sector, you wind up with frontal thunderstorms in the wintertime, but they're usually not as potent as the ones that you get as you move through the spring and in the summer. Raymond points out that warm during Christmas as Albany hit 72 on Christmas Eve in 2015. Yes, I remember that. And I also remember it being here in the low 70s on Christmas Eve. I believe it was Christmas Eve of 15? It must have been 15. Yeah, it's just, that was going into that Super El Nino, so not a surprise. The Canadian RGM model enjoyed bringing a minor hurricane in the Bahamas in position to hit Boston. Okay, let me take a look. I did not see that. I did not look at the Canadian. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Hang on. Let me just get a close-up view of this mess. And as we all know, the Canadian model, I've said this many times, likes to spin up everything. We're getting to the season where it's going to want to do this. I'm taking a look at it now. It takes one of these tropical waves out in the Atlantic and revs it up as it heads toward the Bahamas. Let me see. I'm guarantee you the European did not do this. And I'm correct. The European doesn't have it. The European doesn't have it. I will not give the Canadian serious consideration. Broken clocks are right twice a day. So I don't know why that model does what it does. It likes to do that a lot. Wait till we get to the later August and early and into September, where it literally, there was one point last year that I think it spun up 6 hurricanes in the Atlantic, and I don't think a single one of them wound up being reality. So you got to use models, especially the Canadian model. You really have to use that with a salt mine worth of salt, enough salt to cause monumental high blood pressure. And be very careful when you look at models, because that's what they are. They're models of the atmosphere. They're tools for forecasting. They are not Bible, okay? They're not gospel. And a forecaster's job is to use those tools as best he can and his forecasting experience to come up with a likely scenario as far as an outcome is concerned. They are not to be, it's wrong to use models as absolutes because there's just too much variability, especially the further out in time you go. So you young folks out on board right now listening to my little lecture, pay attention, remember that, okay? And by the way, it's okay to be wrong. When you're wrong, you admit it, and you look at the reasons why you were incorrect, and you discover where your forecast went wrong and what path you took that got you to that point. I would advise all of you that are novice forecasters or even not novice forecasters. You can't be you can't have an ego when it comes to this sort of thing. It can be very deflating and very demoralizing sometimes, especially in the winter, because you want to get it right, you want to get the forecast perfect, but there are going to be times where that's not going to happen, and you need to understand when that happens. You need to go back and evaluate and openly discuss it. It's perfectly reasonable to say, hey, you know what? I looked at this and I thought this was going to happen, and it didn't. And you can correct yourself for the next time. Let's see. Devlin says never use the gem to predict snowstorms and snow totals. Oh, absolutely not. There are a number of 40-inch snow events on the Canadian that I'm still waiting for. GFS European, okay, within 2 to 3 days, but you still use caution. And you know something, Devlin, with the way the models have behaved, with just some of these small-scale events, even inside 72 hours, there have been model shifts that have occurred. We just saw that at the end of this past week and going into this weekend with this coastal low and the upper trough and how it swung around and how the models were handling it. And the European was dead wrong in its analysis. And for a couple of runs of the NAM, it was dead wrong too, in bringing less than 95 low to just southeast of Montauk. It never wound up even close, and the rain never made it up further than southern New Jersey. And this is what happens. You got to be very cognizant of the fact that the models are also having trouble inside what we would normally consider to be a more reliable range. And even the shortest range models like the HRRR model has been just downright awful at times. So you want to be careful, and you want to use those very, very cautiously. Try to recognize when models are working. You look at the model and look at what's going on in reality at the same time, and see where they're off. See which one has the best view of things. And sometimes it might be the Canadian model. You know, if when you work with these things long enough, you get a sense when a model is doing something different from what the others are doing. That's a good alarm bell in your head to go off and ask yourself, why is it doing it, and figure out what is going on atmospherically on that particular model that's getting it to its solution. Because sometimes when one model is doing something completely different from the others, it's sending you a signal. And oftentimes the other models over the coming runs will follow up and catch up to that one that stands out. The RGEM was one for the end of this week. That was one of the few models that was trying to show everything south and east, and a much less developed upper air trough in the eastern part of the United States than what the other ones were doing. And you know what? It wound up being correct. Devils has found an outlier, common outlier, pay some attention. That's exactly correct. That's what I just, pretty much what I just said. The outlier, if you find an outlier, figure out what it is why it's doing what it's doing. And sometimes it'll nail it. And this case for this past week, Devlin's correct. The WRF, which I seldom look at, and the RGEM, which I do look at, really picked up on it pretty early. So good thing to remember going forward. And if we get this situation to repeat itself, to take a look at those models in short range situations. All right, folks, we did pretty good here. 42 minutes, not bad. Let's call it a day. And I would just say thank you very much for being here on my YouTube channel and for these live streams. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, by all means, go right ahead and hit this little subscribe button so you get notifications of what's happening over the next couple of days when I do a video, be it a live stream or if I'm doing a taped version. You can get a notification of it, and you can come right on board. I'll give about 1 to 2 minutes of lead with that open graphic and the music, so give you some time to get on board, and feel free to participate in the chat. Pulsac, like the hurricane a couple of years ago when it was supposed to hit Joaquin in the Northeast, and the European was the only one. That's correct. It was the one model that really got it all. They all had tracks to the coast. The European had it tracked out. There was a tropical storm, remnants of a tropical storm to the northeast, and that basically opened up an alleyway for Joaquin to move out. I remember that very, very well. All right, folks, have a great rest of your Sunday as we are going into Sunday evening. I hope you had a great weekend, and we will talk to you tomorrow.